Hello, welcome back to the second episode of the night. But you don't know that because they're coming out on different days. So, yeah. And we have, you know what, I'll wait for that. With Into the Mic podcast with Carson.
And Zachary.
And Evan.
Yes, we have the great Evan once again for another episode. So exciting. So great. Alright, so in this one, we're talking about the Blake Griffin trade, the impact it has on both teams, Clippers, Pistons, in case you've been living under a rock, and the John Wall injury, all-star replacements, and Kevin Love injury, and how bad the Goran Dragic going to the all-star team was. And here we go. Alright, we're back. Now, first we have the Blake Griffin trade. Now, first we're going to talk about the impact it has on the Clippers and their organization. Now, who wants to go first?
I'll go. So basically, like Carson, if you've been living under a rock, Clippers trade Blake Griffin and Bryce Johnson. It was the 25th pick of the 2016 draft. And Willie Reed in exchange for Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban Marjanovic, 2018 first-round pick, top 4 projected, and a 2018 second-round pick. So Clippers get good young talent out of this trade. But really, to me, it depends on if they can re-sign Avery Bradley after this year and Tobias Harris after next year. Because if they don't re-sign either of those, now they have, for the superstar Blake Griffin, is first-round pick and a second-round pick. But even that, clearing his massive contract of 5-year, $175, that's a lot of money to put into 28-year-old injury-prone power forward who's been really good. I can't lie. He's been really good over
When
the
he
past.
plays, but he never actually plays.
Right, so he has to actually play a full season to have a big impact. Clippers obviously are going to try to have a soft rebuild, try to get a whole bunch of first-round picks for their aging veterans. Lou Williams, DeAndre Jordan, probably the next CEO this season. But for the Clippers, they get 2 starters out of this trade, Tobias Harris and Avery Bradley. So if they do manage to re-sign both of them, they could have Patrick Beverley when he comes back. That could be one of the top defensive front courts in Bradley and Beverley, because those two are 2 of the top defensive guards in the league. And then you have Tobias Harris, Danilo Gallinari, if he can stay healthy, and then probably draft picks at center because they're probably not going to keep DeAndre Jordan. So that has potential right there. It's just a matter of they can get depth out of the draft and have get good picks. That's it for the Clippers for me.
Yeah, I think the term you used, soft rebuild, was good. That's it seems sort of like what the Redskins are trying to do with the Alex Smith trade. Try to stay somewhat competitive, or as competitive as Alex Smith can keep them, while also, gathering your assets and getting ready to rebuild. I don't know, there's something about it that just seems off, especially after they pushed so hard to re-sign Blake Griffin, and reports were that they gave him this big presentation where they said, one day your jersey will hang from the rafters at Staples Center.
It still might. I mean,
yeah, I mean he certainly made probably a bigger impact on the Clippers than maybe anybody ever, except maybe Chris Paul. But yeah, it seems a little hypocritical of the Clippers, and I hate the Clippers, so I love to see them suffer like that. But I don't get why they would make such a big to-do about keeping him and, making him part of Los Angeles culture, except Los Angeles doesn't have any culture, and then just letting him go for kind of chump change. Yeah, I mean, not to say that Avery Bradley and Tobias Harris are chump change. They're certainly good contributors, but even in a blockbuster trade, you wouldn't expect to have those guys get sent somewhere in return for former number 1 overall pick, all-star, superstar Blake Griffin.
Yeah, I mean, in case you've been living under a rock for the past, 8 years, when Blake Griffin was drafted number 1 overall by the Clippers, he completely changed their franchise. I mean, the makeup of it, everything was supposed to be built around him. Lob City was only possible because he was there. I mean, he was the face of the franchise for 7.5 years. And to see him go so suddenly, because did you guys see any trade talks before the day he was traded?
This came out of the blue.
I didn't see any.
From what I heard is that It was basically Steve Ballmer and 3 other executives for the Clippers that were the only people who were even in trade talks. Basically, they were just. This only came out of the past like week and a half that they were talking about Blake Griffin deals, and so basically what the Pistons did is they went back and looked at Blake Griffin film all the way back to MVP season in 2013-14. They just looked and see if he was going to be a next franchise piece in their. Well, not really next. They don't really have a big piece except for Andre Drummond. But they want to give up a couple young players in Bradley and Harris for him.
Yeah, I mean, Blake Griffin, of course, I've hated him for his whole career, and I still hate him. But he's a great player. I mean, you can't deny him. One of the best playmaking big men, if not the best in NBA history. Maybe not the best, but definitely one of the best. He's a really good passer at power forward, and he's one of the most athletic. Like Zachary said, he had that 2013-2014 MVP campaign where he was actually in the running for it for a while, but injury problems have always caught up to him. Like I said, face of their franchise for a long time, and this reminds me of the Paul George trade this past summer because we had the 3 teams that we thought Paul George was going to get traded to. Mm-hmm. They said Celtics, Cavs, and then I can't think of the third one, but there was a third team that was really into trade talks with them. And then the Thunder come out of nowhere, and he gets traded to the Thunder. I hadn't heard anything about
Lakers.
Paul George. Yeah, Lakers, because people said he was going to sign there anyway. So
I think he probably still will.
Yeah, but so it was Celtics, Cavs, and Lakers, and then the Thunder just come out of nowhere, and I did not see the Pistons getting anywhere near Blake Griffin.
Yeah.
A 28-year-old turns 29 in March, injury prone his whole career. Was the number 1 pick 8 years ago. Like I said, injury prone his whole career. He's had these nagging injuries that have always gotten to him, and the Pistons are a soft rebuild team. I like that term for the Clippers and the Pistons because they're kind of in that middle space where they're not going to be able to contend unless they get lucky in the draft because they're going to have a middle of the pack pick, which you usually don't really find the studs in that range. But it's the Pistons are not the team I'd expect to go after Blake Griffin. I'd expect a team more like a lot of the teams that would have gone after him don't have the cap room to go after him, right. Which is, I guess that's why the Pistons emerged as a number 1 suitor.
Mm-hmm. Right, and Steph Van Gundy was saying, after the trade, he said we were surprised that Blake Griffin was available. So the Pistons didn't even think they were going to land him.
Yeah.
Like I said, they were in the trade house for about a week and a half, and they were trying to center it around Tobias Harris and first-round pick for Blake Griffin, and merged with Bryce Johnson, and then I like Bryce Johnson out of college. He was one of my favorite players on the UNC team. But he has not lived up to first-round potential, but could find something in the new.
I don't like that they traded him in that deal. I thought that was a really bad decision. It seemed like they were just trying to throw in players just for the heck of it, and they threw in Bryce Johnson, who's this 21-year-old power forward who might have actually been starting for their team since they really don't have any front court depth other than their 2 starters, and Willie Reed was their backup center, I believe. So I don't know why they would choose to throw in Bryce Johnson of all players. If they were trying to save cap room, he isn't a huge cap hit, and they have tons of other players that they could have just dumped off for absolutely nothing. Like Zachary said, if they don't re-sign both of those players or at least trade them for something, then this trade was absolutely horrible. Maybe one of the worst trades in the past couple of years because, they lose the face of their franchise, their team leader. He was having a really good season when he was actually playing, but the Pistons got a good player. He torched the Grizzlies like always in his first game in a Pistons jersey. And what's funny is he didn't change colors at all.
Yeah, no,
he went to the same colors just in a different format.
Yeah, and you're talking about the Pistons being middle of the pack. One of the reasons that they have Drummond obviously the centerpiece, but then they really don't have anything more than depth on that team before the Blake Griffin trade. And that's the main thing that they lost in this deal.
Yeah.
You have 2 starters with already lack of depth. For one superstar who's going to be paid lots of money, Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin are going to be making a combined $70 million next season alone.
Wow.
That's a lot of cap space for two guys. Reggie Jackson was also being a little bit overpaid, and he's been injury prone as of
They're gonna
lately.
have no cap room to get
So
anyone.
the only reason the Pistons are seemingly going to win now when they're giving up a young guy like Harris, I think they could make a push if Reggie Jackson comes back like he did before he went down, and then you're gonna have Jackson, Griffin, and Drummond on that team. But it also depends on if guys like Reggie Bullock and Stanley Johnson, if he's not traded before the deadline, they have to step up in their new roles and um, be the starting caliber. Um, I'll have to say role players because that's what there have to be
Yeah.
besides
And
Drummond and Griffin.
and speaking of Stanley Johnson, I hate that the Pistons are including him in trade talks because he's a 22-year-old, I believe, that has potential as a really like a defensive specialist, kind of what Tony Allen was for the Grizzlies, with possibly more scoring potential. I don't like that they're including him in trade talks. I don't understand unless you're getting another superstar. I don't know why you would really put one of your young players out there. And I've also seen that they would be willing to give up Luke Kennard for a superstar. I don't understand any of these decisions they're making. Trading for a Blake Griffin, 28, about to turn 29, injury prone, doesn't seem like he would really fit in with their team all that much since they don't have a playmaking point guard really. They have a shoot first point guard in Reggie Jackson, which is not really what you want with a shoot first kind of scorer in Blake Griffin. You know, Andre Drummond. I think if they got a playmaking point guard and Luke Kennard really would fit in with those two as a shooter because they don't really have any shooting elsewhere. And if Stanley Johnson becomes, if he develops and which I honestly don't think he will, but there's a chance always, and he develops into an amazing defender, and they get a playmaking point guard. I think this team, it's a good team, but it's not like top of the league, like championship contender team. But it would be an exciting team to watch with that really good front court. Yeah, but because you have an offensive-minded power forward and a defensive-minded center, those are always fun to watch because that's what it was in Los Angeles with DeAndre and Blake. So it's basically just transitioning to a better, younger version of DeAndre Jordan, I think.
I think that this trade in some way was bad for both teams. It's like an odd fit because we made that point about the Pistons already being a little shallow in terms of their depth chart and giving up two starters. And so, they get a certainly good player in Blake Griffin, and it could work out perfectly for them. But it's more of like something as spectators, as fans of the NBA, we kind of enjoy seeing blockbuster trades like that just because it alters the dynamic of the league. But realistically, both of these teams might come away with a lot less than they expected because the Clippers gave up probably more assets than they were comfortable with. And the Pistons may have gotten someone who doesn't exactly fit immediately. So
but I think they'll start to try and build around him, which I don't know if is the right decision. I think Andre Drummond should be the player they kind of base their team around with trying to get shooters and offensive-minded players, which, like I said, Blake Griffin I think really does fit in with Andre Drummond, but they don't have the other pieces around them that fit with them. Luke Kennard, he's kind of one of the most underrated rookies I think this year. His three-point shot has been, it's been dropping this year for him like really well, which is what people expect him to be, but he really can't. That's really not his only thing. He's not a horrible defender. And I don't think people give him enough credit for all the other stuff that he can do for an offense, and just I think that he could be a nice piece on their team. Losing Avery Bradley was kind of a big hit, even though he didn't really fit in. And he'll be asking for a lot of money. Tobias Harris was probably the biggest hit that the Pistons took in that trade because if you look at Tobias Harris, he's one of those players that gets better every year he plays basketball, and he's gotten better every single year since his rookie year. And they would hope that he would continue to get better and better. And he really fit in with this team at power forward. His shots were dropping this year more than they ever have, like by a lot. His defense is of course amazing. He's a great defender. And I just think that was maybe a little bit too much to give up for Blake Griffin, a 25-year-old who really fits in with your team, and maybe you use those picks that you gave up to get more players that fit around the team you already have instead of going for a player that might fit in with your team. And you give up a lot for him, and if it doesn't work out, then this is a horrible trade for the Pistons, and it could also be a horrible trade for the Clippers if they don't use those assets like they should.
Yeah, and I would argue that, well, some would argue that DeAndre Jordan and Andre Drummond have a lot of similarities in their play, obviously.
I think Drummond is a much better player.
Yeah, but both defensive-minded, like Carson said, and both get you double-digit rebounds. But Andre Drummond is one of the more selfless basketball players
Yes.
at the center position. But Blake has to learn that DeAndre Jordan wasn't somebody who was really playmaking center. He was just a lot of near the rim stuff, blocking shots. Andre Drummond does a lot more than that. He has a better mid-range jumper, and he can create more plays for the rest of his team. So Blake Griffin's going to have to learn to deal with that. The other thing is that Carson was talking about building around Andre Drummond, but I would argue that it's tough to rebuild around a defensive-minded center. We saw with the Jazz how mediocre they were with, even they had Gordon Hayward and Rudy Gobert, but Rudy Gobert is defensive-minded center and he gets you double-digit rebounds, but that's not something that I can see that you can really rebuild a team with.
I think the biggest difference between Andre Drummond and Rudy Gobert is the passing, because you put maybe the two best playmaking big men in the league right now in Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin together, and you put a shooter with like Luke Kennard, like I keep saying, and then you put more scorers around them and a playmaking point guard who can also score or maybe do more, then that's honestly probably a good team. I mean, if you look at it, because Andre Drummond is averaging a lot of assists for a center, and he learned how to pass this offseason. He learned how to be a team player because he used to be taking way too many shots. He used to be doing way too many posts. He used to be posting up way too much, and now he's become a selfless basketball player, like you said, and that's really helped the Pistons this year, I think. Even if they're not doing well right now, I think Blake Griffin I think that's gonna push them to the playoffs. Maybe not an amazing seed. Maybe they don't go far, but they still make the playoffs when they might not have without Blake Griffin. So I think that's a big thing. But I still don't think this is a good trade for either side, unless the Pistons find like a stud in the draft that can go along with his other two. I don't think that they're really a title contender for a while.
I would love to see the Pistons get the 7 seed and then the Cavs get the 2 seed, because the Cavs aren't getting the 1 seed. But we also know that the Cavs always have this late season lull, and then at the very end they get a push and they get, they get a good seed, and they feel like they're prepared for the playoffs. So if the Cavs get the 2 seed, the Pistons get the 7 seed, I would almost bet on the Pistons, because the Cavs have been
their front court is so bad.
The Cavs have been so close to falling apart so many times this season already. I think all it would take would be going up against Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond for them to just totally disintegrate.
Kevin Love can't defend Blake Griffin at all. There's no way he would be able to stop Blake Griffin. And who will be their center at that point? That'd be funny to see DeAndre Jordan on the Cavs and then have them go against the Pistons, but that would take a lot of what ifs. That would be really fun to see, like a Blake Griffin versus DeAndre Jordan, like Cavs or whichever team DeAndre Jordan ends up on. I don't even know if he'll get traded at this point. It's not even. I
kind of doubt he will. Actually,
it's kind of looking like
I think it's more likely Lou Williams gets traded.
Yeah. At this point. Or maybe they just trade both, and because if they're gonna trade one of them, they might as well trade both.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna
at that point they would just go on to a full rebuild.
And then what do you do with Danilo Gallinari too?
Yeah.
That's nobody wants his contract. Yeah. He shouldn't have signed that. That was such a bad decision.
Well, he was in that 3-team trade with the Denver and the Hawks. Yeah, because that was sent Millsap to.
That's right. And then he signed an extension, I think there.
Yeah.
Right.
And also you were mentioning Harris being a shooter. He's shooting career high 41% from the arc, and he's actually
in the 3-point contest.
I never thought Tobias Harris was one of those 3-point shooters. He's really broken out this year.
Crappy shooter, like really bad. When he was with the Magic, he was just a really bad shooter, and that was really the biggest flaw in his game, because he was a good defender, pretty athletic, but then he moved to power forward because he was a small forward in his first couple years, and then the Pistons have the brightest idea and move him to power forward, and he really fits in there like really well because he can guard people who are bigger than him with his athleticism, and like you said, his 3-point shot has really dropped this year.
Yeah, I'd also say that the Pistons giving up Harris and Bradley, who Bradley's not too shabby from 3-point either, and I'll get to him in a minute too. That Pistons ranked 11th in the league in 3-point percentage, but they are never a team to knock down um, a lot of shots from beyond the arc. So, like, you have limited 3-point shooting on your team already, and you give up Tobias Harris for Blake Griffin, who he's kind of expanding his range, but is not a stretch four by any means.
Yeah.
So they already lose some of the depth, like I already talked about, and they lose some of their 3-point shooting as well in this trade. So they also take on a whole bunch of cap. So I don't think this trade is good for the Pistons. Like, I'm gonna agree with you guys that it didn't work out for either sides, except for maybe the Clippers clearing some cap room. But talking about Avery Bradley, it was like less than an hour before the trade actually got released, and I was texting Evan actually, and I was reading about Avery Bradley and how he was ranked 291st out of like 320 eligible players in PER, which is really bad, only averaging like 15 points a game this season. Was a big decline from what he was on the Celtics. He still has the defensive capabilities like he had, but he was really struggling in Steph Van Gundy's system. I told him he needs to get out of there, and so maybe with the Clippers he could.
He's got to get to the chopper.
Maybe the Clippers can give him some new light. You know, he'll be starting next to Teodosic, and if he resigns, he'll be starting next to Patrick Beverley and create a really good defensive backcourt. If they don't make any like big moves.
Yeah, so I think we've decided this is kind of a loss for both sides, depending on how things work out. So on to the next thing. We have the John Wall injury and the Kevin Love injury. First, let's talk about John Wall. What does this mean for the Wizards?
Well, I don't think the Wizards suffer too much. I think they have a really easy schedule for the next 2 months. Obviously, Bradley Beal's still there. He's probably going to be even more monster than he has been the rest of the season. The Wizards are one of those other teams that don't have a lot of depth on their team, but their starting lineup is solid enough.
I really want to see DeAndre Jordan go to them.
Yeah.
I think that would be really interesting.
So I don't think the Wizards are going to suffer too much. While obviously a big loss, the recovery time is going to be a little bit with the minute restriction. But when it gets time for Eastern Conference finals and stuff like that, I think the Wizards are a really good team that might come out of the East, especially if the Pistons can upset the Cavs. I think Wizards and Celtics would be a very good series because you have John Wall and Kyrie and Bradley Beal and Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, all those guys. I think it'd be a fun series. John Wall is one of my favorite players in the NBA. I don't think the Wizards slip too much, and it might be they slip to like fourth, and then when he comes back, they rise back up to second or third. We'll get to the Cavs in a minute, but I don't think the Cavs can maintain maybe even a top 3 seed. With the Kevin Love trade, they've already been struggling. Unless Isaiah Thomas goes back to his Boston, I see the Cavs struggling, and maybe the Wizards take advantage of that.
I think when the Eastern Conference Finals roll around, the Wizards will be watching from their couches. I feel pretty strongly that if the bracket allows, it'll be Celtics and Raptors. Yeah, so I don't really know what to think about the John Wall the John Wall injury, just because the Wizards, like, I don't think they're going anywhere. Like I said, I don't think they'll make the conference finals, and so I don't know. It may just be time to settle down for the Wizards and just realize, okay, we might not get where we wanted to be this season. Let's just.
But does DeAndre Jordan put them in the next step?
I mean, if that were to happen, certainly.
So you think they could make the Eastern Conference Finals with DeAndre Jordan?
Yeah, that's reasonable.
I think they could beat the Cavs with that.
Yeah.
Because as long as, I mean, LeBron's going to do LeBron stuff, but if you have DeAndre on Kevin Love and you make sure Kevin Love doesn't go off, and Isaiah against John Wall's a good defender, so I mean, you really just, yeah. So I don't think this does a ton for them right now. It really doesn't hurt them all that much with Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal will be holding it down for John Wall. But yeah, that's pretty much it for that one. And he got replaced on the All-Star team. We now have 3 All-Stars that have been injured.
All on
and
Team
gone.
LeBron.
Yeah.
Rip LeBron.
Rip Cavs.
Speaking of the Cavs,
Kevin Love's
Kevin Love.
injury, with a broken hand, out 6 to 8 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
That was such a Cavs thing to happen.
Yeah.
Trying to get rid of Kevin Love, and then Kevin Love goes
Getting
and breaks
injured.
his hand, and there's tension in the locker room with Isaiah Thomas, and the Cavs are just being the Cavs.
Yeah, I mean, they're pulling last year's Cavs, and
Last year's Cavs, they're pulling a last year's Cavs earlier in the season than they did last
yeah,
year.
which is bad because
It's a
Because
lot.
it'll probably keep going until the end of the regular season.
It's a lot scarier for the Cavs than it was last year.
yeah, because they're doing it a lot earlier. They got basically a new team format that they have this year. A horrible coach,
No kidding.
a horrible center, no wing depth at all.
Is J.R. Smith still starting for them?
I believe so.
That's bizarre.
Yeah.
He's old. He's not very good.
I would rather see
He's a
Dwayne Wade
liability.
start.
But yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So I think the Kevin Love injury has big impacts. Obviously, I have not too much confidence in the Cavs other than LeBron. If Isaiah Thomas can, like I said, step it up, they could get things rolling. But I think LeBron is going to see this injury. He's going to see that they're not going to get number 1 in the East. They might get knocked out of the playoffs. Nobody knows how early they'll get out. If they do get out before the finals. But LeBron's going to take a look at this and see how little depth they have, how little cap room, the free agent they have this year, and he's going to say they're going to choose between the cap room and trying to get Isaiah Thomas, or it's going to be me and I could go be a title contender, maybe hook up with Paul George in LA. He has a lot of suitors, obviously. A lot of people
Everyone wants LeBron. I mean,
Right,
why would you not?
and people have cap room, and they have been clearing cap space for LeBron.
Yeah.
Like specifically for LeBron, and so he's going to have a lot of people. He's going to have a lot of meetings. I think it's hard the Cavaliers make it to the NBA Finals, maybe even to the conference finals if they meet a team like the Pistons, the Raptors, maybe the Wizards. The Wizards probably don't have. I know I was talking big about them, but if they meet the Cavs, it might be a problem because they don't really have somebody to defend LeBron.
True.
Yeah, but if you stop the other two, LeBron can't score 100 points a night.
Right.
And they don't really have anyone because Jay Crowder's been absolute dog
He's
crap.
been horrible.
I feel bad because he really fit in with the Celtics system, and then he got traded.
I think the Cavs will be a vastly different team next year.
Mm-hmm.
I have thought since the beginning of the LeBron leaving again rumors that he will leave again. I still think so. There was something Colin Cowherd said on his podcast about not if, but when LeBron leaves. It was a pretty convincing argument. But anyway, I think LeBron will leave, and I think Isaiah Thomas will leave. I could see Kevin Love being off the team one way or another by next season. I mean, and eventually they're going to have to fire Tyronn Lue because if LeBron's not around to coach, who are they going to have? So I think that at least in the next
Vince
2 years,
Carter.
if not next year, the Cavs will be a really different team, and they will not be a title contender for years.
They're gonna have a young player next year, probably leading the team because
unless they give up the Brooklyn pick.
Yeah, and I think at this point
they probably will because they have a rookie GM with one of the best teams. This is what happens when you hand one of the best teams in the league to a rookie GM. It just doesn't work like that.
and also one of the oldest teams. They're like the 4th oldest team in the league, and so you pair that with Isaiah Thomas and LeBron.
And then they signed Dwayne Wade.
Then you have old, inefficient Dwayne Wade on the Cavs. He didn't look like a terrible signing at the time, but has not produced. Isaiah Thomas obviously really struggling since he came back. Jay Crowder not doing anything. I think at this point they have to keep the Brooklyn pick, try to get a young player to lead them, and I think in a couple years we might be looking at a very different team, like Evan said, possibly even, so possibly even rebuilding after a couple seasons because, like I said, they're one of the oldest teams. They don't have a lot of young guys. There's no really assets on that team, but they have Ante Zizic from the Boston trade, but he's not somebody like even like a Stanley Johnson who's has potential. He's just one of those project types that can't help you in a couple years. So I think if LeBron leaves this free agency, which he most likely will if they don't make the finals, and maybe if they do make the finals and they get swept by the Warriors, he's always going to know that they're not going to be doing the same thing again. That next year, they have very little cap space. They have a couple bad contracts in Channing Frye and Tristan Thompson being way overpaid. I think the Cavs are looking very bad this season. And at the beginning of the season, everybody thought defensively they were going to be horrible, and they were. And now it's defense and offense because LeBron cannot do everything, and it's showing the weaknesses in the rest of the roster.
Yeah, so LeBron can't score 100 points a night, like I said. I think like you said about the Wizards, I think the Cavs will be watching from the couches in the Eastern Conference Finals and the NBA Championship. I think that's pretty much it for this episode. Thanks, Evan, for recording another one with us. We appreciate it. We hope to have you back on it soon, whenever. So thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed. So make sure you follow our Instagram, into.the.mike, no capitals, and enjoy the Super Bowl. Be safe. Don't die. Thank you.